Today's guest is Sha Davis. Based in Houston, Texas, Sha is an established artist and creative force in her local scene. Welcome, Sha.
Hi.
Welcome, welcome. So we were talking a little bit about this before, but it's exciting to have you on. You've done some fun things, and I think all the listeners will really enjoy hearing about them. So so let's start at the beginning. You're in Houston right now, is that correct?
I'm currently in Austin right
Oh, in
now.
Austin.
Yes, I bounce back and forth between the two, but I'm mostly a Houston girl for sure.
Did you grow up in Houston?
No, I did not grow up in Houston. It is quite the complicated story. But I served active duty for 7 years with the Air Force. And after I
Oh,
got out, I decided to settle in Houston. So I've been there since 2014.
wow, that's fantastic. Active duty. Well, thank you for your service.
Of course, I loved it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So where did you grow up? Where did you grow up, I guess, from childhood?
I am a very Southern girl. I'm from Mississippi.
Oh, nice. Very cool. Very cool. Mississippi.
Yes.
How did you get involved with music?
Obviously, the typical Southern story. I started in church. I was in an a cappella church, so everything we did was a cappella. And I went from there to actually being an opera singer. I toured as an opera singer all the way through high school and my first year of college, and then I joined the military.
Wow, an opera singer. That's so fun. And you
Yes,
toured. Where did you tour?
we did. Excuse me, we did touring throughout the United States. So we did touring all the way way up to Seattle, California, New York. It was an overall operatic all-state choir. So it was a really great experience. I sung in multiple languages. I got to learn so much. It was incredible. And it taught me so much about music and its foundation and kind of respecting it as an overall performance art.
Absolutely. Did you play any instruments at this time? I know you said this was a cappella, but on the side?
Oh, I did not actually get, and this is a crazy thing. So I was a cappella for so long, even in the operatic, because we did a lot of SATB, SSA. So we didn't actually use a lot of music. And when we did, it was mainly piano. So I actually did not start, and you have to excuse me, my allergies are
Oh,
killing me.
you're fine.
I actually did not start using music like as a band until I formed my band in 2016. So it was like a whole nother introduction to me, like learning bass, learning keys, kind of learning to work with a band in that way, because I had been a cappella my whole life. So that was actually really, really new to me.
Wow, that's awesome. So what was that band called?
The band is called the 1990s. I actually still
You
have
guys are
them.
still
Yeah, we still.
nice. That's awesome. Did you start playing live around that time and or
Oh, so Houston is a monster of a music scene in that it's completely opposite from Austin. So it's like a secret society, honestly. And I think a lot of Houston musicians will agree. If you want to play a place, you better know 15 people already who've already played there, or they won't even see you. So it is a
really?
monster of a music scene. It's very difficult to get into. And you just better play some free shows and hope people like you, and just keep doing that until you could get into the paying shows. And even that's hard. And another thing I learned was I actually own 3 different sizes of PA systems. I had to learn how to run sound. Houston doesn't have a lot of clubs that has their own sound even provided, because it's just not a large market for live bands. Um,
Wow.
so there was just so much for me to learn. So with getting with them, they taught me how they ran their amps and everything. So I learned how to run a basic backline and bought my first PA, and then I bought my second PA and learned how to get bigger mixers and run sound around a room. And I mean, I had to learn a lot just in the Houston market, because it is tough. It's a tough market. So entering into that, I would do a lot of free stuff, a lot of stuff with backtracks or just my guitar player, because I couldn't bring the whole band, So just working my way, up into where people go. If you book her, the show will be great. And you really need a lot of people to say that, or they're not booking you at all.
Oh man, that's insane. I had no idea it was that intense over there. That's
Yes.
crazy.
Yes, and it's different in Austin. Austin's not like that. I mean, you can call a club, send them your reel. It's like a typical, send them your reel, couple references, and you could get booked. But it is not like that in Houston at all.
Wow. How does that compare to Mississippi, where you grew up?
I've never played a show in Mississippi.
Mm, interesting. Interesting. Did you ever attend live music when you were in Mississippi, or?
I did not. I was so inundated in the kind of church atmosphere that's really all the music that I got. And my dad was really into blues. So I would go to blues festivals, but other than that, I didn't have like a lot of exposure to rock or really anything that I currently play. It was just very, very, blues and R&B, a little R&B, some old school, which I'm grateful for, of course, because I think my music take is very eclectic because of that. But it was just not a lot of exposure to what I get to actually see now.
Oh, that's interesting. That is interesting. Well, so when did it click? So you said you served with the Air Force. When did it click that you wanted to do music professionally?
After I got out of the military, I always knew I wanted to be a songwriter. And so I had kind of started that the whole time I was you know, in the gospel choirs, things like that. I would write songs for those artists. I actually wrote songs for artist Tiffany Malone, who has won acapella gospel awards. One of my songs was actually featured on The Good Wife, the TV show.
Wow, nice.
Yes, and it was a gospel song as well. So I started writing songs for artists, but I did not realize I actually wanted to be an artist until it was like an act of rebellion, because people kept telling me I couldn't do it. They were like, your voice is kind of strange. Or like your personal music's a little weird. I could write the spec. So if you're like, hey, I want a song about this, I could do that. But my own personal stuff was just a little strange. I would add opera in. If you listen to my EP, like on the song Ghosts, there's opera all through it. I mean, like everything's weird. And I'm fine with that, but it was kind of put in my head that would be very difficult to come across. And because that was posed to me, I was like, all right, well, now I have to try.
Oh man, that's crazy. Well, so yeah, you mentioned your EP, and you just released a new single, "Too Deep," earlier this month, actually. And as we were talking about again before this, I think it's fantastic the way the guitar comes in, and your voice. I think your voice is fantastic. I love the vibe of your voice. But tell us what that song means to you.
Oh, so quarantine. Interesting things happened during quarantine. I mean, so with my EP, Songs I Wrote When You Left, I put a lot of like love and dedication into that EP for over 18 months. And the reason being is like I wanted it to be the closest thing to what I want my art to sound like. So what I did was with my collective House of Her, we went around Houston, we interviewed 180 people about love. We talked to them for hours. I edited that down into a 15-minute documentary, which is also, it's called The Love Project. And throughout the EP, there's little snippets of those interviews that I did. And every single interview that I did, I wrote the song on spec, basically about what was said in the interview.
Wow.
Yes. And I just put so much thought into that thing. I actually composed most of the music myself. And I just put so much heart and thought into it. And so then when it came out, which was on March 13th of last year, on March 14th, we shut down. So March 13th, out, oh my gosh, I had PR, I had all of this stuff, like everything was rolling out. PR started in January, and I had been applying for South by for 3 years. I finally had landed 2 South by showcases. We were touring, we were out for the year, and actually when everything shut down, we were doing dates in Dallas. And I actually work for Peloton. So my manager told me, like, you need to come down and shut down some of your locations because it looks like we'll be down for a week or two. Oh, a week or two. All right. So I come back, I shut down my location and I go home. And before I know it, like I'm getting, emails every day of cancellations of my shows. It was so devastating. The only good thing is I woke up I think the first week of April, and I had sold a ton of EPs. And come to figure out, Bandcamp had featured me as a featured artist for April. Wow. And it was amazing and like reinvigorated me for a minute, but then obviously 2 weeks later, that had kind of died down. And I honestly was very done with this whole thing because I had put so much energy into it. And what I learned over quarantine in doing that, and I think a lot of artists learn this, is just make art. And all of these plans and stuff that we make and we start trying to build, like, all stop, don't do that. Focus on your art, focus on your work, and everything that happens, just let it happen. Because when you get like stuck in your head on like, oh, I'm planning this, when it falls down, your art takes a hit, right? Like you stop making, you don't want to be bothered with it. You don't want to, because it's failed you in some way. And I almost felt like that. I almost felt like, oh, it failed me. I put so much into the art and then it failed me in return, when really it didn't. It just being alive was enough. And so that's what kind of happened with Too Deep. It was a little situation I was in, and I was like, I'm going to write about it. I was like, actually, I'm going to write about everything. So actually, over the next couple months, there's going to be a lot of those that happen that are going to be coming out. I wrote about everything. Everything that happened, everything. I was just like, I'm going to go back to that. And so I composed the song in, I think, about 9 hours. I had kind of worked on it. I brought another friend in, and he finished out some of the percussion, and then we recorded it and we put it out with no fuss. Even the video, we just went to a hotel parking lot and recorded it, and just we're going to put out stuff and stop putting all of this pressure on it. So that's kind of what was behind that. I felt away. I wrote about it. I recorded it. This all happened during the ice storm here in Austin. Actually, it was
wow. Oh man. Oh, that's insane. No. Well, that's crazy. So all of that hit you all at once with the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic disrupted the entire world, and threw a wrench in everybody's system. But that's on a personal level. That's really a lot, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly, I mean, so much work goes into setting that up, and to have that be taken. Yeah, I'm sorry that happened at that time.
You know what? I think it was so necessary, because I was actually going a direction I didn't even want to go. And I didn't realize that, because I was doing 4 or 5 shows a week, most of them corporate, which the only reason it was just to make money, right? So I'm doing weddings and, bar mitzvahs or whatever. I'm doing that. And I didn't even want to be doing that. I mean, I had started booking shows finally in Houston, which was a hard thing. So when people start booking you, you take it. And before I knew it, I mean, I was doing 4 or 5 shows a week on top of working, on top of trying to make, all my other personal music and a documentary. And I think a lot of people went through that realization of like, am I even doing what I want to be doing? Or did I kind of get myself into a situation? And I'll be honest, the pandemic got me out of the situation to where I could back out and go, I'm only taking gigs that I want to do now.
Wow, that's actually great perspective. So it kind of refocused your lane then that you want to be in.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. So when all that happened, and the pandemic begins and everything, what happened to you right away? Did it take some time for you to get back into creation, or did you kind of jump back into it?
Oh no, I quit. I honestly, genuinely quit. I was done. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I wrote for other artists for a couple months. And then I wrote to spec for a little while, which is just basically syncing. So I just work with this international company. They give me specs. I'll compose or write to it, and then they play it in grocery stores or, Forever 21 or something like that. And you make a passive income off of it. And I did that for a little while, and I was like, I just don't want to do it. And my friends, they were on my case. I mean, they were constantly like, Shay, like, you're not going to do anything. So luckily I had House of Her, which is like my saving grace. And it allows me to kind of go about this at a whole different perspective, right? So we do set design, we do stage design, we do styling, photography, and editing. And so people were still doing videos. People were still doing photography, and they need a small crew, which House of Her is me and my best friend, Jessica. So it's only 2 of us. So we do everything. I mean, we run sound, we run lights, we do everything.
Wow.
So that made people go, let's book House of Her. They're a small unit, they're contained, and it's literally, they can make anything. So I went back to sculpting, which I hadn't done since high school. I started sculpting things. I started sewing again so I could make backdrops. I started, really focusing on different types of art to kind of get outside of that headspace I was in, which really felt more like a business failure, I'd want to say. It really felt like a business failure, because I actually turned my band into a really successful business. We were booking like a business. We had contracts like a business. And I had felt like my art failed me like a business. It's so crazy that I allowed it to get that far. So then when I started focusing on just House of Her, you know, me and my best friend stand up all night sculpting styrofoam to make a tiny world for a video shoot, you know,
Yeah.
it really just changed my perspective. And I was like, I don't know what I was doing. Like, I don't know how I let myself turn. I don't even want to be famous or anything. I don't even know what. It was just like things would come and I just take them, you know, just to have the ability to sing for people. And I think it just changed my perspective.
Well, and did you say that you had South by Southwest booked?
Yes, we had 2 showcases.
Wow, that's insane. Yeah, so that is, oh, that's so cool. That's well, I hope that, you know, so you said House of Her. I actually had a question about that because that sounds like a pretty cool thing. So it's you and your friend, right? And you do all these, you set up these events for these people essentially, right? How long
Yeah.
have you been doing that for?
We hit our 2-year mark, which is wild because I feel like it's been forever. In February 14th. So it does feel like we've been doing this forever. She's originally a photographer out of Houston. And she's phenomenal. Just, she's honestly a genius. And I had been wanting to get into set design because when I was in high school and we were doing, and in college, and we were doing all these operatic things, we would do a lot of set design, a lot of theater. I mean, I'm a theater geek, you know, ultimately. So we did a lot of theater, a lot of stage design. And I wanted to get back into that. And she always needed a set designer for her photography. And so we're like, let's do a little collective. We'll do a couple shoots together and see how it goes. And then 2 years later, you know, we're just building full-on stages and full-on sets for people. And so it really just it kept me in art and allowed me to step away from music for a little bit and like regain perspective. I didn't want to put out trash to you guys. Like, I didn't want to put out garbage because I didn't want to write. Like, I just genuinely didn't. I was in a space of like, how do I go about this in a way that's very genuine? And the only way to do it was to honestly step away for a minute. So now I get to come back and like make really dope things. We actually did our very first House of Her show since last February, where we threw a whole prom. Like we went all the way out. And that was for the release of Songs I Wrote When You Left. We did a whole prom. It was an art prom. It was incredible. So this past 2 weeks, we actually threw an art show and we designed everything. And we made a big 3D cube of an installation and we put my band inside of the installation. Then we had a projection on the back. It was incredible. It was crazy. And then we made all of the fog out of dry ice and it like the creativity came back, you know, after I stepped back for a minute. I would have never done that at South by, you know, I would have brought my stuff, got up there and just sang. And now wherever I go, like, I'm like, we're taking PVC pipes or something. Like, we're not, you know, I'm approaching this in a whole different way of, I want to make art and I want to focus on that.
That's awesome. I think that's great. You know, to feel like you have your lane back. You know, I think that's awesome. That's awesome to see. Well, you're also involved in another pretty big group, Women in Music.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about that. What your role is in that, and what Women in Music is.
Yes, I'm on the board of Women in Music for Houston, and I'm the events coordinator. So before the pandemic, we were really powering up to start actually building out our membership. So it's a relatively new chapter. Houston chapter was formed last January. So right when we were kind of gaining steam and starting to have member events, we kind of shut down. So Women in Music in general is an organization that's international and it focuses on making sure that women can book festivals, making sure that women can be sound engineers. I'm also a part of Sound Girls, which is another company adjacent to Women in Music that focus on female sound engineers.
Very cool.
Which, I do sound and production and all of that stuff. So it was super important to kind of merge those two. So in Houston, there's a ton of venues, but when you go into these venues, it's very low representation of women, especially of women in color. So it's a group that just basically gives that opportunity to us in a way that makes us feel like we're fully supported. And it's completely international. So if we go into another city like LA and they have a festival there, I actually get to go to that festival. I actually get to talk to the other people there and kind of build a relationship with them and make an agreement to, you know, kind of look at their diversity, look at their inclusion and start trying to make sure that that's front of mind when they're doing their hiring.
That's fantastic. That sounds like it's a great thing. And you mentioned that so you're the events coordinator, so you make sure that there's representation then essentially for these women, especially women of color, like you said, who might struggle a little bit more, might struggle more, quite a bit more in some cases than and I think that's fantastic. We support that theme and a bunch of groups like that. I love that. That's why I wanted to ask about that, because that sounds like a very cool thing that you're doing, and you have the experience to go along with it, with everything else that you've been doing. You also say that you're a voting member of the Recording Academy Grammys.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that.
I've been in the Grammy Association for about 4 years, and I'm also on the committee for campaigns. So right now, we're actually working to put together our yearly advocacy day. We do an advocacy day every single year where we talk to our senators, all of our local senators. We actually have a sit-down conversation with them. This year is on March 30th. So you can be looking out for that because I'll be posting like crazy. And we're actually going to be doing Zoom calls with all of our local senators and talking to them about songwriters' rights. This last year, one of the biggest things that we focused on was Spotify, the way that they pay us, the way that they significantly underpay us. And we actually won that. That went all the way up to Congress, and Spotify has 5 years to bump up the pay. And that was done. Wow. Advocacy Day. Not only that, the radio stations, they were actually trying to stop paying royalties altogether, which is completely asinine because not only I know. So they didn't want to pay royalties because they feel like a lot of them were state ran. So the problem with that is a lot of the songwriters that they're getting the music from, obviously they're profiting, but even the lines that they use to run the stations, these songwriters, they're local songwriters. We pay taxes, which pay for the overall public stations that they're running, and they don't want to pay us. So we were kind of crazy on that one. And we took that up to Congress too and had that law also banned. And that was Prop 19. And so this year, we're really focusing on COVID recovery and resources for artists, because a lot of us, like I have a corporate job and I'm very, very grateful for that. But a lot of us do not. A lot of my band members don't have corporate jobs, especially musicians. I think they take it actually the hardest because you spend so much time learning an instrument and so much time touring and learning music that actually it's really hard to have a day job. So a lot of them don't have insurance. They don't have resources at all. And the stipends that they've been getting have been from grants, but nothing from the state. So we're actually going up and speaking to our senators this year, talking about COVID resources and relief for musicians.
Wow, it sounds like that's quite impactful, actually. I had no idea that the radio stations were trying to not pay the artists. That's very interesting. Huh?
Crazy.
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. That's a whole, that's interesting.
But it's something they can get away with because actually those laws haven't been revisited for over 100 years. So a lot of times the radio stations aren't paying but 3-4 cents a stream because those laws haven't been revisited. But not only that, there aren't any online streaming laws at all governing the way that they stream online, which is why we were so hard on Spotify, because these laws are so ancient that they don't include modern day streams. Like if you play a person on the radio and you pick them up in your car, that's one streaming price. But if you're on iHeartRadio and you're streaming the radio over an app, they don't have to pay us for that.
Wow.
There's no law. They don't have to pay royalties on that.
Wow. I had no idea about that. That's very interesting. That's crazy. Well, it sounds like you're doing good then. well, that's awesome. So you're involved in all these organizations. How do you find time to write music?
Okay, so that is the wildest thing. Like I don't actually write a lot of my stuff. So I freestyle everything. So essentially I could be asleep and I have to wake up out of my sleep because songs just like appear. Like it's insane. I could have a really hard day and I don't know what caused my day to be hard until I start freestyling the song. And then I just put them all in my voice memos. And then when I have an off day, like today, I was actually off today. I'll sit with my computer. I'll go through Splice. I'll find some sounds that I want to mess with. And I kind of flush the song out. Sometimes I even have to send it to one of my band members because they know my style and kind of like my tone and all of that. And they could play me maybe a bass line or something that I could add and kind of get started with. So I freestyle for days and days and days. And then when I have an off day, I find one that is like really messing with me and I just flush that one out.
Okay, yeah, that's nice. That's actually a cool process. I like that a lot. But, and so we're talking about all these things that you're involved in, the politics and the business end and everything like that. Um, do you think that musician and artists in general have a social responsibility in their communities?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We absolutely do. Well, I'll say this, because that's actually, now I'm thinking about it, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I feel like some artists have a responsibility to community and some of them do not. And I say that because there's such a variant in human experience that if something doesn't bother you, it's really hard for you to make art that'll be representative of
Meaningful.
the experience. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think if you find a cause that bothers you, it is your responsibility then to make something that speaks to that. But if you don't, I unfortunately can't hold you to it. There are some artists who just make music, and that's okay. And that's okay because some people just want to hear music. They don't even want to hear your politics. And that's unfortunate. But some people just don't want to hear it. And there are some artists who feel like it's their responsibility. And those artists, I do feel like it's their responsibility. I wouldn't want anyone to try so hard to be socially responsible that they make music or art that's disingenuous.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you're coming at it from a perspective of understanding, I guess, when you approach these issues, and that's clearly much more impactful
Absolutely.
than trying to just kind of latch onto something you might not fully understand. I agree with that. I think that's fantastic. What are some social issues that are important to you? I've noticed that you post about something sometime, and we've talked about a few of those organizations, but why don't you tell us about what's important to you?
Obviously civil rights in general is going to be important to me. Right now, Asian and Pacific, that's going to be highlighted for me. Obviously, Black lives in general, the lives of Black women, trans women, LGBT community in and of itself, human rights in general. I'm also vegan, so I don't like people killing animals, but I do my best on that one. I don't like to judge, so that one's actually really, really tough for me, because if I see a plate of meat, I'm like ill, but I'm also not going to say anything. So I kind of um and then overall the health of the planet. I was actually today watching this documentary Seaspiracy, and it like really got to me, but it is on Netflix if you want to cop that. But it is tough. I mean, like, it's tough to see. And really all of that would be, I mean, if I could say I was an advocate of anything, it would be of life in and of itself, just the ability to live and prosper. That's going to include, anything that would oppress another individual, animal, or the planet in and of itself. So, I guess I'm a big hippie and saying I just feel like everything and everyone should have the freedom to exist.
Well, you have our support. That's a good that's a good we can get behind that logic. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, so what are some of your long-term plans then and goals?
Right now, I am working on something that is so lofty, but it's happening. It's going to happen. It's going to work out. And it's very important to me. But it's an artist in residency. It's going to be actually in Houston. And Houston doesn't have an artist in residency. There are 4 artists in residencies in the state of Texas. And essentially, just in case anybody doesn't know what that is, artists in residencies are usually when they take you from a weekend to months and they develop you as an artist. They allow you to come out and work on art in complete peace. They provide you with all of the supplies that you need. They provide you with mentors, and then at the end they provide you with the ability to display and push your art forward. And that's not something that exists in Houston at all. And like I said, there are only 4 of them in Texas, and they are hard to get into because there are only 4, and this is one of the largest states in the United States. So I'm actually developing an artist in residency with House of Her, and we're trying to start working with artists of color to help them kind of develop their overall art. So we're working with some Airbnbs that have some space out, and we're going to be doing tiny houses, providing them with all art supplies, and we're hoping to launch next year. But that's literally like I want that to overall be my legacy, is the development and the push forward of art, and making sure that I give other people the opportunity to kind of do what I was able to do over quarantine. I hope we never have to quarantine again, but I did learn from that isolation pushes you so forward and understanding what you want to see so that you can bring that forward. And I took that ability. And so even though our first artist in residency, we're looking at 3 days, even 3 days of being able to just do art without working and, driving back in Houston traffic back and forth and, having to deal with so many other energies and just focusing on your work and other artists around you, it's life-changing. And so I would like to bring kind of that quarantine experience, to Houston in that way. So right now I'm working on an artist in residency, and I'd like to say that overall I'd like to grow that to where it's quite large. And so I'll be working on that until I'm 100 years old.
Yeah.
I want that to be something that stops, but that's what we're working on right now. We're hoping to launch it 2022.
2022. That sounds like a huge project. That's cool though.
For sure.
Oh man. Well, yeah. Again, you have our vote. If there's anything we can do to support, let us know. We're firm believers of we help each other out and we all rise together type of thing.
Absolutely.
So if there's anything we can do to help that, we clearly also support musicians and the arts in every way. And so that's awesome that you're doing that. That's really cool. What's a piece of advice you would have for an artist starting out? Maybe a young artist who's trying to find their feet.
Learn the business. Like, it's all cute to do art, but I have been ripped off so much that it just honestly is so devastating. And the thing is, like, you could blame the people, but what ends up taking the hit is the art. It's always the art. Any bad thing that happens, the art's gonna take it. You're gonna go, I'm gonna work a corporate job and not worry about it. You always want to abandon the art because of it. So start knowing your business, know what it is you want to be and what you want to do and who you are. Figure that out as you make your art so it can't be taken from you in any way. And really know your business. Get into contracts, start getting into music organizations where you can find mentors and people to teach you things and to make sure that you understand. So even if you don't want to be Beyonce and you just want to be a small local artist, that's fine. Don't get ripped off, because I'll tell you something. There are rappers that are all on TV touring who make less money than the artists I work with in Houston. And the reason for that is because of how they look at their contracts and how they're handling their business. How many people are you paying? What kind of lifestyle are you living? And those type of things, you got to figure out what kind of artist you want to be, because you can be a showy artist that flies all over the world. But I'm going to tell you, there are local artists in Houston that fly all over the world and you don't even know who they are. And looking at it different aspects, like, what kind of artist do I want to be? You can be just a corporate artist. There's nothing wrong with that. And you can put out songs every once in a while. And you can make really good money, make a good living. But if you want to be famous and all of these things, know your business, because you will get robbed by people who know your business. That's just facts. So the more people who know more stuff than you, the more people put in a position to kind of take advantage of you, and then your art takes a hit. So I would say just know your business, have a good vision of what it is, what kind of artist you want to be and what kind of lane you want to take. And don't let a quarantine be the thing that makes you sit down and look at it. Know what you want to be and know how to be it.
That's fantastic. I totally agree. Thanks for sharing that advice. That's very important. The last thing you want as an artist is to be taken advantage of. I mean, the last thing you want as a human being is to be ripped off, or taken advantage of. But especially with the arts, a lot of business strategy can fall by the wayside. And I think that's fantastic advice. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Well, it's been fantastic talking to you. I've loved hearing your story and what you do. And honestly, it's fascinating. But a lot of the stuff you're involved in is very interesting. I'm actually going to go look a little bit more into some of these, like the laws that you were mentioning and everything, because I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I'll be glad to forward over some stuff too. Just real quick, obviously we try to spread as much as we can before Advocacy Day, so we can have the support people as we go up to Congress and kind of, ask for things, lobby a little bit. So I can definitely forward over some materials if you're interested.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to see it. Yeah, if you'd send that over, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
That'd be fantastic. Well, fantastic. Well, yeah, thanks again. Bowie, do you have any other questions at this time?
Yeah, actually, for people who don't know anything about the Austin music scene or the Houston music scene, how would you briefly describe both of those cities' music scenes?
The Houston music scene is very heavily rap. It just is. That's why there's not a lot of sound of equipment when you go to venues. It's very heavily rap and historically rap. I mean, you got to look all the way back to Swisher House and all of that. It's like, it's legendary as far as that's concerned, and I have all the respect for that. But it created a different environment when you want to go out with the band, because there's just no setup for that. A lot of clubs don't have to pay for sound equipment. Rappers use backtracks. Sometimes they might use a little percussion, but even that's underneath a backtrack. So it's just no requirement to invest heavily in PA systems in these clubs. Austin's completely different. Austin's very rock, very, live band. So when I go to places, I don't have to take my sound equipment. That's always. But on top of that, they're always looking for new artists in Austin, whereas Houston is a more closed off scene. They'll take you, but you really have to have a list of recommendations, because they have to go through a lot to bring you in. So if they have to run sound and all of this stuff, you need to really deserve that, because it's hard for them to do, because they don't have the setup for that. So that's really the big difference in it. So Austin is a lot more welcoming to bands in and of itself, because they got a setup for it. And people come and want to listen to live music so much in Austin that they need as many artists as they can get to rotate, because they can't have enough. Whereas Houston really, really heavily, honestly, is very much rap. They could, they could have a DJ. It's a lot of DJs out there. It's just really, the scene in it just isn't conducive to bands. It just isn't conducive to live bands at all.
So it sounds like, it sounds like you're saying that if there's a new artist who wants to move down to the southern Texas area, they should probably start in Austin, right? Then eventually move down to Houston if they feel like it, or what should it be?
No, I would actually disagree with that, because over the last 2 years, Houston is changing. It is a beautiful dynamic that I'm seeing happen. I'm so glad I already started, because I can book my gigs. But Houston is like, I mean, like, I think all the artists there, like, I feel something happening here. People are developing festivals. People are buying sound equipment. And I think it's because hip hop is, it's great. But if you're looking at the music scene in and of itself, people are switching away from rap heavily, switching back to indie, rock, and R&B. And it happens all the time. And it's like, it's cyclical. But rap was so heavy for a while, and now people are like, I want to hear some R&B. And I don't know if it was quarantine, because we couldn't really go out and turn up, and so they just like turn Drake off. and so I don't know if that's what it was, but like R&B's coming back hard, and so they're starting to go, let's start investing in like actually having some bands come out. So Houston's changing. So I would actually recommend, and Austin is such an established, everybody knows to go to Austin, that the competition is 3 miles long, And in Houston, that's not the case, because they're just now starting to make that shift. So if you wanted to be opportunistic and you actually have some talent, I would actually say to go to Houston. It is going to be hard, because you actually really have to have some talent, because it is hard to get into these venues. And there's unfortunately 5 or 6 of us already like, hey, they got sound equipment, I want to play. But it's not 1,000 bands that you have to weed through in Houston. So I actually would say go there first. They are changing a lot. It's changing very quickly.
That's great
That's
insight.
good to know.
Yeah.
That is great insight. Absolutely.
And we always need more musicians. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about Houston, is there are a ton of musicians. But I think, honestly, I go to all the jam sessions. I see the same faces, I see the same faces, the same musicians all the time. Although I love those faces and I love those musicians, it is an opportunity to come in and really, learn a lot from them and start to kind of make your own pathway, for sure.
That's awesome.
That's good to know. Yeah. I think that's actually a great insight to anybody who's looking to move down there, like Bo was asking. That's great. Yeah. Thanks for that insight.
Of course.